A lot of them, left the area. Only a few families remained, after the Civil War period in particular. Oh, and I didn't mention, but during the Civil War, Schoharie was, had a lot of copperheads in town. They did not believe in arming the soldiers and the black soldiers, and neither did New York's governor. So we were one of the last free states in the North to send black troops in, and they did it by going around the governor. The Union League in New York City had people like the Roosevelts as members, and they were able to eventually get the military establishment to approve them raising a regiment, and they raised the 20th U.S. Colored Troops. So what you find in Schoharie County is the early black Civil War veterans are actually in some other state's regiment, because they came here to recruit. They had to meet these quotas, so they would come and recruit these New York blacks so that they could reach these quotas. And it wasn't until the 20th Regiment was formed that they could serve under their own state. Yes?
I saw a documentary on TV about this. One of the groups that they mentioned were the Masons. And what they would do, on their chimneys on the top, you have that cover, the side rocks coming up. They would put their symbol on there, and that told the slaves that was a safe house.
Right, there's different things they did. In other words, the Reverend Van Alstyne, supposedly when he was preaching or whatever, would give out some hymns that would be a clue to the people in the seats that something was happening.
Yeah.
There was no kind, I've heard of quilts, where they have these quilts made up that tell a story.
Yeah.
So there was various, yes.
The house in Quaker Street, does that still stand?
Yes, the Skinner house is still there.
It would be on what's now Route 7?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I thought I recognized it, I
Yeah.
know that.
So your Quakers are, and like I said, up in Charleston, Four Corners was another Quaker settlement. There was one in the town of Carlisle. There was a Quaker settlement in Carlisle. I don't know, what time frame it was, but there was a Quaker meeting in Carlisle for a period of time. Yes?
Yeah, do we know what the stop before they got here was? Was it New York City?
Oh, well, basically, from what they're saying, in other words, the Quakers are saying, is that they came up the Hudson to Queeman's Landing, and you saw that old Dutch house in that picture. They would have gotten off there, and then they would have been brought to other safe houses, like Quaker Street, where we were.
Right.
And then they would have gone to Schoharie here, to this guy's place. And then they would have gone up to Charleston, Four Corners, or Sharon, where, Dr. Marina stopped, or someplace like that.
Yeah, and the reason I'm asking is because in Flushing, Queens, there's a Quaker meeting house, and there's signage about, it was a depot in the Underground Railroad, and it was a Quaker family, last name was Bown, B-O-W-N, that were key to that movement of refugees, if you were to call them, through New York State. And actually their descendants stayed in the same location even after the war. Was an acquaintance of my great uncle who knew that farming field when there were farms in Queens.
It's interesting that if you look at the black families in the 1850s, the New York Census 55,
Yes.
We're
Yes.
55, right? I'm looking for 1855 census. You look at the last names of some of those black families, Stoutenburg is one of them, and they were from downstate. In other words, from the 1600s, really early family. There's a historic home down there and everything. And you'll find them up here, black Stoutenburgs, that evidently were slaves to the Stoutenburg farm down there and made their way up here. You'll see, you'll see various families living in one home, in the census, with different last names. So there was, quite a population here, and it's interesting because the 1850 Fugitive Slave Law Act was passed, and all of a sudden there's a mysterious body that shows up in the town of Esperance, in the area where the black families live. And it's in my book here. And at first they think it's this criminal, Sam Steenberg. They think it's his brother, And so they have a coroner's inquest, and yeah, that's who it was, and up until he shows up alive with a new set of clothes. And, I guess it wasn't him, and so this lady says, oh, it was my son Jake Berg. He was in the, basically, they, you know, like in an insane asylum, but he was actually in the county poorhouse, and ran away, you know, and they figure he died from exposure or whatever, and that's who it is. So everybody was happy that's who it was.
The poorhouse in Schoharie, was it just one in the whole county?
Yeah, you had poor masters in each town, but you had one county poorhouse, the poorhouse farm there in Middleburg.
And that's where the
The Russian Orthodox.
Orthodox.
Right, there was a building there before that.
Yeah, and that building, you think that was the original building?
The one that's there now is not. There was a white Greek Revival farmhouse type building that was there.
I thought.
It was a regular farm, you know, where they
Yeah.
worked on the farm, those are great. But, yes,
I grew up in Philadelphia, New York, which was founded by the Quakers, and we have several houses up there with tunnels going under the streets because we're only 15 miles from the Canadian border. So I wonder how many slaves finally made it up there to go across.
yeah, it's interesting to think, you know, what direction did they go? I mean, a lot of them crossed at Niagara Falls, I understand, in that area. You know, to get there is quite a trip, you know, and if you came to Schoharie, and there's always black people here, and keep in mind, you know, you study the Sloughters, for example, and nobody that was of any, afraid of their reputation, a white person that is, would never be seen there. So it was a safe place if you were a black person, especially, to be up there, because nobody would come around, because they knew it was not, you know, it would wreck your reputation, you know, back home if you were seen up in the neighborhood.
Now everybody's proud to be a Slav.
Isn't this county where they started, the Sloughters?
Well, there's different, in other words, different areas have different names for the same kind of thing. It's supposed to be a mixture of, you know, black, Native American, and white people together. Our particular area, some say it came from the actual name, Sloughter. I found, what was her name? Who was the genealogist before?
And
Before you. Marty Foley. Marty, yeah. Marty told me that, she would cut out stuff that she would find and come across, send it to me. And there's a Maria, Sloughter in this article with another woman, and they're arrested for operating a house of ill fame. And the one lady's put on bread and water, okay, at the jail. It says right in there, you know, 100 days or whatever, bread and water. And I guess they're supposed to cool, they thought they were over or whatever, and bread and water was supposed to cool them down. And so Maria Sloughter later changes her name to Maria Slater. So you'll find this, where they change, the name is so bad, the connotation of being your last name Sloughter is so bad, they change their name to Slater or something else, so that they don't have that connotation going with it.
Les and Ann Hendricks wrote that book about the flowers. There's lots of stories in there.
Yeah.
I have a question about the slaves' names. When they were taken as slaves, they were obviously given names probably by their masters because they had to call them something. And then when they were on the road to freedom and they got set free, did they keep those names? And is that how these names were established, or did they pick
What
new names?
happened, I had another slide program that had 81 slides and I had to cut it back. But basically around 1809, a law was passed allowing black people to hold property and things. So at that time is around the time that churches started giving them last names in the church registers when they got married. Okay, so at that point in time, a lot of them just took, but then you find other names, like Smoke is a common name in this area. Okay, so we'd take names like that. I remember a preacher I was at a conference with, his name was Joshua Licorice. You know, they would, you know, they took names, Cole, you know, they would take names like that. I imagine there was a reason, you know, behind it, you know, but they didn't write, you know, read and write, most of them. So like when they got in the Civil War, you know, that was easy for them to bounty jump, you know, they just write their name and then change it and write something else at the next station, you know. And so there was quite a bit of that went on too.
Thank you, Ken.
You're welcome.
I'm so glad you did it.